On this video, I've been working my way through Job, and I want to deal with chapter 28 of the book of Job. This is an amazing chapter on the search for wisdom and where wisdom can be found. What I'd like to do is work through the Hebrew text, reading it verse by verse, along with grammatical analysis and a brief commentary or comments. And if anyone would like to follow along with an open Hebrew Bible, that would be great. This is a classic chapter in the book of Job. It is interesting in the Sonsino Bible commentary on the book of Job, the author, Victor Reichert, makes this statement, and this is on page 140. He talks about this particular chapter. This chapter is one of the deservedly celebrated portions of the book and one of the incomparably great poems of the Bible, and indeed in world literature. The theme is at once the nature of and the quest for wisdom. Where shall it be found? And it's interesting that his statement is so true. It is one of the greatest poems in the Bible and also in world literature. As I look at Homer in the Greek text, the Iliad, for example, or look at Virgil in his writing, the Aeneid, or looking at different Akkadian texts that I've been working in, this is amazing. Chapter 28. It's the search for wisdom. He talks about going into the mine underneath the earth and hanging, but wisdom is not there. So where is wisdom? He comes to the conclusion that it is in the fear of God and doing what he would have us to do. So what I'd like to do is begin reading the text, looking at the grammar, and then working through the text verse by verse. Let me just say a word about vocabulary. For anyone that may be following in Hebrew, some of the vocabulary of the first 7 verses would be motzah, which means going, a place of going forth. But here, I think it means mine. And then sakak means to refine or purify, the verb sakak. Atzok means to melt or to pour out. Nechusha means copper. Taklit means end or completeness. Chakar means to search through, to explore. Ophel means darkness or gloom. Salmavet would be deep darkness. Actually, it's the same word used in the Hebrew in Psalm 23, verse 4. Ki alek begate salmavet, even though I walk in the valley of deep darkness, I will not fear evil, for you are with me. Parat, in verse 4, means to break or to break open. Meni is really a poetic form for men. Dalal means to totter or to hang, looking at the miners as they're tottering or hanging. Anosh is mankind, looking at humankind, men. Na means to swing to and fro, or to totter, na. Safir means sapphire, and natit means pathway or path. Ayat means birds of prey, and shof means or shazaf means to catch sight of, to look on, and ayah means falcon, or it can mean hawk. One of the best tools for vocabulary, which I appreciate, and I'm looking at even now as I'm working through this vocabulary, is the Reader's Hebrew English Lexicon of the Old Testament in 4 volumes by Terry Armstrong, Douglas Busby, and Cyril Carr. So, having looked at the vocabulary, I'd like to now go into reading the text and looking at the grammar. We begin in verse 1. Ki yesh la kesef motza umakom la zahav yazoku. Yazoku. That is, for there is for silver a going forth, and then we could render this a mine, a motzah, a place for gold that they refine or that they melt. Here we have the verb zakak, meaning to refine or melt, and a place where they refine gold. This basically is the cow imperfect third common plural from zakak. And so we're looking in verse 1 at the miner going into the mine where a shaft is open and they go down into the mine. And gold here, or silver, it's hard to find, but it can be found by men. There is a place for them, and man may discover their location. And I think as he's describing mining here, let me just make a statement about this great chapter as we're looking at it. Job has stated that God often does vindicate his justice by punishing the wicked during their lives. But the afflictions of the righteous remain unexplained. Man can use his skills to find and bring the precious metals from the earth where they are concealed, but he cannot answer Job's question. God alone possesses the key to wisdom and his inscrutable purposes in the universe. So, as we're looking at this, we see a search for wisdom, but it will not be found in mining. Then we go to verse 2. It reads, Barzel me afar yukach, ve'evan yatsuk nechusha. That is, iron is taken out from the dust, and a stone that is molten out of brass or copper, out of brass here. Notice here, iron, barzel, is taken from the dust. Yukach is from lakach. It's a puel, imperfect, third masculine singular from lakach. The form would have been yukach, where the lamed has assimilated by progressive assimilation into the kof, similar to what we have in a pay noon verb. So iron from the dust is taken, and stone is molted. Uh, in other words, excuse me, brass is molted out of stone. Notice here, yatsuk is from the root sok, which means to melt, or to by melting, to create uh, the uh, the brass or the nechusha. Again, as we look at this, he's continuing to develop how the miner has gone down, and from what he does, there is this melting and molding, or how brass is molten out of stone. But then we go on to verse 3. Kates Sam Lachoshek. Man sets or places an end, or an end he places for darkness. And ulecho taklit hu choker, that is, and he searches out to the furthest bound, taklit, to the really the limit of his searching. It is interesting that as we look at verse 3 here, taklit means end or completeness. So to all the completeness or end, he searches out. Hoker is from hakar. It's a cow participle, masculine singular, from hakar. So for the end, he searches out, or man searches out. And then the next phrase, Evan Ophil Fetsalmavet, that is, he searches out stones of darkness, and Salmavet, deep darkness, or like the shadow of death. Looking again at the miner going in underneath to mine gold. It is interesting, again, Salmavet is the same word that is used in Psalm 23. Ki alek begate Salmavet, lo irara ki ata imadi. So it means really, in the English, it was translated shadow of death, but it means like deep gloom or darkness. And we see this as the miner is going underneath the earth to 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 mine for gold. As I look at this particular verse, it is interesting to me. We're seeing that he's trying to discover the gold, and he's going down into the hidden crevices for precious metals. And he searches out by using torches and whatever he can do to find it. And he goes on to continue to describe one's search, the miner's search, I should say. Notice verse 4. Paratz nahal me'im gar. He breaks open a nahal. I think we could render this a shaft from really where men's from me'im gar, from, I think we could add men here, from where men sojourn or where they dwell. Gar is a perfect perfect here participle from gor, to dwell. So he opens a shaft, a nachal. Often nachal is sort of an interesting word that he uses here. it is often used, for example, of a of a torrent of some sort. But I think here it's looking at the minor shaft that he opens up. So he opens up this shaft that the miner does, where he can seek to find gold. And then he goes on to describe how the miner is forgotten by those on earth or above, let's say, walking. Notice Hanishkachim Mini Ragel. That is, they are forgotten uh, from foot, literally. It's interesting. Hanishkachim is from shakach, to forget. And here we have a nifal participle, uh, third plural, or masculine plural, from gur, a nifal participle, articular participle. So they are forgotten from foot, literally. And I think the thought here, from those that are passing above the mind, so to speak, they're not aware of the minor underneath. And then we go on, dalu me anosh na'u. They hang far, we could say, from men. Literally, they hang from men, and they totter, or they swing back and forth in na'u. Notice da lu here is from the root dalal, meaning to hang. It's a cow perfect, third person or common plural from dalal. So they hang from men. And I think the mem here means away from men. And they totter. I think the thought here, no, they totter back and forth. They wave back and forth in the mind. This is from nua, middle weak verb, which means to totter. So they totter or they wave back and forth, and they're mining what they're doing. Now it's interesting in looking at this verse, verse 4, with ropes, we could say. The miner descends into the blackness looking for metals. They break open a shaft and are oblivious to those walking on the outside. I think this is what the text is saying. So they're oblivious to what's going on the outside as they swing about in the mines, suspended from ropes in the dark recesses of the earth. And so this is what I believe the text is saying so far. So let's go on then to the next verse, which would be verse 5, and it reads, Eretz mimena yatse lachem. That is, as for the earth, from it bread comes forth. V'tachtecha nechpak kemo esh. And that is, and underneath it, it is turned up, we could say, as it were, by fire. So from the earth, Eretz mimena, earth from it, literally, or from the earth, Yetzeh is from the root yatsa, to come forth. It's the cow imperfect, third masculine singular, from yatsa. So from the earth, bread comes forth, and in contrast, in, let's say, pastoral farming, to what's going on in the mine. Betachtecha nechpach kemo esh. And underneath it, that is underneath the earth, uh, it is turned up, as it were, uh, by fire, as I'm supplying with fire. Kemo H. Kemo would be as, and I think we have to supply as with fire. So underneath, it is turned up. Notice here, he's looking at the mining process, and nechpa is from hapak, which means to turn, and or to turn up. And notice here, we're looking at a nifal stem, nifal perfect, third masculine singular, in my understanding of this form here. And so underneath, it is turned up as by fire. So then, as we look at verse 5, while the earth's surface is given over to the peaceful cultivation of yielding bread and food, underneath the earth is everything is in upheaval from the work of the miners. So he's contrasting the two here, the work of the farmer and the work of the miner that is underneath the earth. And then we move on to verse 6. Makom safir avaneha ve'afrot zahar lo. That is, from the place, or the place of sapphire, of stones. In other words, stones, or its stones, we could say, are the place of sapphire, is what the miners are finding, and dust of gold belongs to it. It has dust of gold, or afrot zaharlo, dust of gold belongs to it. A couple of things here. Notice we're not looking, there's no verb here. The stones of sapphire, two nouns in construct, or literally, its stones are the place of sapphire, I should say. Makom Safir, the place of sapphire, two nouns in construct with each other, are its stones, and it has dust of gold. Afrot Zahar belongs to it. And so as we think about the imagery here, we are looking at the dust that they find, which is really, can I say, gold underneath the earth, is what the text, I believe, is saying. So then, just to make a statement about this, along with metals, sapphires are also found in the heart of the earth. And we could render this gold dust, possibly, dust of gold. It is interesting as we look at this afrot zahab, it may refer to the particles of iron pyrites found in lapis lazuli, which glittered like gold. At least that's a suggestion in the New Century Bible, page 229. So as we're thinking about this, we're looking at the sapphires that produce sort of like a dust in the imagery here. And then we move on to verse 7. Natit lo yada'o ayit, velo shezafato, velo shezafato ein ayah. that is a path the falcon or the bird of prey cannot find. In other words, the bird cannot go down there and find it in the underworld. Neither has the eye of the falcon, I guess we could translate that, has seen it or has caught it, looking at where the miner is. Uh, in verse 7 here, ayat can mean bird of prey. So I think we could render this uh, the path, the bird of prey does not know it. Notice yeda'o is from yada. It's a cow perfect third masculine singular with the pronominal suffix third masculine singular in the o. So the bird of prey does not know it underneath the earth. Velo shezafato ein ayah. That is, nor has the hawk or the falcon, we might say, the eye of the falcon. Here we have two nouns in construct again. Nor has the eye of the falcon or the hawk shezafato. This is from shazaf, which means to catch an eye of. So neither has the eye of the falcon uh, caught it. In other words, or seen it. I think that's the thought here. And it's interesting. No bird can go down there. I mean, they can go all over in other places, but they're not able to do that. Just to make a note here about this verse. Most birds of prey are noted for their keen eyesight, but miners go into places where the eagle's sight is of no value, for no bird of prey or falcon's eye has passed there. I think that's what he's really saying. So we're looking again at, I think the idea here is searching for wisdom and going underneath the earth and mining. And we're going to find out that wisdom is not there. Because in verse 12, there is the question, but wisdom, where shall it be found? And where is the place of understanding? So there's this beautiful, can I say, biblical picture written in this poem of the miner and what he's doing to find wisdom. Where can it be found? Just to read the text now a little bit in the Hebrew. Ki yesh lekesef motza umakom lezahav yazoku. That is, there is a place for silver and a place, there is a mine for silver and a place for gold that they refine. Barzeh me'afar yukach ve'even yatzuk nechusha. Iron is taken out of dust, and brass is molten out of stone, or stone from stone understood. Brass is molten. Verse 3. Kates sam lechoshek ulecho taklit hu hoker even ofel vetsa mavet. That is, man places an end to darkness, or sets an end, the end to darkness. He sets, that is mankind. Ulecho taklit hu hoker even ofel vetsalmavet. He searches to the outer limit, or furthest, we could say, limit uh, underneath the earth, and the stones of darkness and deep darkness, or thick darkness and deep darkness, he's down looking at or working in. Paratz nachal me'im gar hanishkachim mini ragel. Dalu me'anosh na'u. He breaks a shaft open where away from where men dwell, and where they are forgotten, literally from foot. That is above. They don't know what the miner is underneath the earth, or underneath the ground. Dalu me'anosh na'u. That is, they hang away from men, and they totter or swing back and forth. Eretz mimena yetze lechem v'tachtecha nechpa kamo esh. As for bread, the earth, from it bread comes forth, and underneath, though, uh, where the miner is, it is turned as by fire. We could be looking at blast here that the miner would use underneath the earth. Makom safir avanecha ve'afrot zahavlo. A place of sapphire, the stones of it, where the miner is, and the dust of gold is to it, or belongs to it, underneath in the mine. Nativ lo yeda'o ayet velo shezafato ein ayah. That is, the path, the bird's eye, or the bird of prey, does not know, and neither has the eye of the falcon caught it by his eye, or seen it. So this is a great piece of literature. I'm going to stop there and just keep working through it. This is a challenge to me in my retirement here, and I find that Job is very challenging, the Hebrew and the thought of Job. I've done a lot of Hebrew grammars, inductive Hebrew grammars in the Psalms, and basically this is, I don't know, very, very challenging looking at the Hebrew. Let me just make one other point that I think this whole chapter is fitting for me to think about. I'm a retired professor from a seminary, and I'm also a minister, a Christian minister. And I was thinking of the New Testament, and especially in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, where Paul has a similar discussion about a search for wisdom and where it can be found. And he says, we are speaking Sophion de la Lumen in tois teleois. We are speaking wisdom among the mature. Sophion de u tu ionas tuta, not the wisdom of this age, udeton arkanton tu ionas tutu ton katargumenon, nor the wisdom of the rulers of this age. But he goes on and says, Allah la lumenta u sophion in musterio. That is, we are speaking the wisdom of God in a mystery. Tain apa kekrumenein, that which has been hidden. Chen proorisin chata aspra ton ionon eis daxan chemon, which God has predestined before the ages unto our glory. And the wisdom that Paul is speaking about is the wisdom of Christ, of knowing Jesus Christ in an intimate and personal way as Lord and as Savior. So it's interesting. I'm wondering if Paul might have been very familiar with this text and had used it in writing, for example, some of his writings, and especially like in First Corinthians here. Well, let me stop here, and then we'll go on. In a later video, I'm going to try to work through some of this Hebrew. It's a challenge to me because it's such a elevated Hebrew, I think, in the book of Job. Thank you. I hope this is helpful.